Hello, folks. We're down the line from Cape Cod once again tonight with political analyst, author, and historian Dr. James D. Boys. I'm Michael L. Roberts. This is the American Chronicle. We do warmly welcome you to this 19th episode of the American Chronicle, an episode that takes place in a quiet week in American politics, and a week that leaves us overreaching for subject matter, as it were. I began tonight's episode then by asking James what, in his professional opinion, the hell is going on.
Well, I've used Jeb Bush's line before, and it's appropriate to use it again. You know, Donald Trump has been was a chaos candidate. He's been a chaos president, and he's clearly a chaotic candidate for re-election here in 2020. The old saying that a week is a long time in politics. Well, a week seems like an eternity in politics at the moment. The idea that it was only a week ago that we were thinking that the big news leading into the final days of the election would be with regard to the New York Times story about Donald Trump's tax returns. And then, of course, there was the first presidential debate, which, of course, caused much to do around the world, and which, of course, we spent the last podcast talking about. Since then, you know, a few things have happened, to put it mildly, not least of which, of course, is the revelation that Donald Trump himself has come down with COVID. Along with it, must be said, a number of other people, not least of which, of course, is the First Lady, about whom very little is being said here, it must be said. Stephen Miller, the president's advisor, the president's press secretary, and a whole host of other people around the president are now sick or with symptoms of COVID, most of which seems to have focused upon a press conference that was held at the White House to unveil the president's nominee for the Supreme Court. Some people might, of course, look at this and say, well, this is ironic. Many people thought, of course, that was an event that should never have been happening in the first place because it was inappropriate considering what the Republicans had done 4 years ago with regard to Merrick Garland. And I'm sure that some critics of the president will be looking at this and saying, well, there's a degree to which this is the chickens coming home to roost. That, of course, would be a very unsympathetic approach to take. No one would wish this ailment on anybody, quite frankly. But very, very clearly, things have changed significantly. Donald Trump was hospitalized at Walter Reed Medical Hospital over the weekend. He dramatically discharged himself effectively, and in a flurry that was reminiscent of Francis Coppola's Ride of the Valkyries sequence from Apocalypse Now, at best, and at worst, more of a Rennie Leifson style, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, triumph of the will approach, landed on the White House lawn on Marine One, and then immediately recorded a video cast to the nation, basically telling the American citizens not to worry so much about this. Don't worry about it. It's only caused 200,000 deaths and hospitalized an American president in what was seen as the worst health crisis for an American president since Ronald Reagan was shot outside the Washington Hilton in 1981. So much so that many people, myself included, were asked across various media channels to discuss the implications of the 25th Amendment, which of course deals with the transfer of power from an ailing American president. So, you know, we've seen an awful lot over the last couple of days. There is more yet to come. The chaos surrounding Donald Trump continues and will no doubt continue for the next 4 weeks and arguably beyond whatever happens on Election Day in November.
Before we launch into the inevitable discussion and detailing of the somewhat incredulous series of events surrounding Donald Trump and his own unique brand of coronavirus, shall we say. I was watching back our Sunday supplement this morning and wanted to ask you something before I forgot. What was in terms of rushing through Amy Coney Barrett's nomination, as it were, for the Supreme Court, what are the benefits to Trump in terms of the election and perhaps events immediately after the election of ensuring that she was in situ around that time?
So getting appointees confirmed to the Supreme Court was a major reason, I think, that Donald Trump was elected in the first place. 4 years ago, I'm sure there were many moderate Republicans who took great issue with Donald Trump personally, but figured, you know what, if we don't have a Republican president, we won't get Republican nominees to the bench. We'll have nominees put forward by President Hillary Clinton, and that will help shape the court for a generation. Well, guess what? They should be quite happy. Donald Trump has now moved to name his third appointment to the Supreme Court. It looks very much as though Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, will be working very closely with Donald Trump to make sure that nomination goes through. To directly answer your question, there are several benefits. By ramming this through now effectively, he ensures that this is Donald Trump's nominee that gets considered and almost certainly confirmed by this Senate. Because, of course, the election that comes up in November, which we're focusing upon, isn't just to decide who it is that's going to be president of the United States moving forward from January, but also will decide the fate of 1/3 of the United States Senate, and along with it, members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, not least of which is people like Lindsey Graham, for example, who's facing a tough fight for re-election. So if the nominee were to wait until after the election, as of course Mitch McConnell insisted on happening 4 years ago, it could very well end up not being Donald Trump's nominee, but President Biden's nominee that goes to a Senate which may not be controlled by the Republicans, but controlled by the Democrats. So you could end up with an entirely different nominee being considered by a Senate with a very different makeup if the Democrats were to have a great night come election night. Right. So the reason the Republicans want to basically put this through as fast as possible is they want to consider Donald Trump's nominee to the Supreme Court, who has been put forward, as you rightly point out. B, they want to make sure it's they themselves, who are controlling the process because they control the majority in the United States Senate. And under the rules that were changed in the last decade or so, you only now need a straight majority to confirm, not a supermajority, which of course they have. And C, if there is any debate and discussion and appeals with regard to the election come the first week of November, and that were to go to the Supreme Court for its final say, guess what? You'd be looking at a 6-3 Republican majority, and 3 of those 6 Republican appointees would have been nominated by, guess who? Donald Trump. Now, it should be pointed out, of course, that we've seen appointees to the Supreme Court defy the president who had previously appointed them. Very famously, Earl Warren, who was put forward by Dwight D. Eisenhower, routinely bucked Republican orthodoxy, was later referred to by Eisenhower as the worst darn mistake I ever did make, and very much came in line and was seen as almost like a Kennedy justice. Indeed, it was Earl Warren who delivered the oath of office to John F. Kennedy. And of course, it's the same Earl Warren whose name was given to the Warren Report into the president's subsequent assassination. So the idea that these 3 nominees by Trump will simply fall in line with whatever it is that Donald Trump thinks, wants, or says is not true. However, you'd have to say that on the balance of probability, they'd be more likely to favor a Republican approach to law and order and to interpretations of the Constitution. So both the Republican leadership in the Senate and particularly Donald Trump, I think, want to make sure that there is a complete court, because at the moment, of course, there is an 8-person court due to the vacancy, which could result in a tie if there was a vote. And B, of course, they want to make sure that they get their latest addition onto the court, so that if there is an appeal to the Supreme Court around the election, or as well, don't forget, there are other cases involving President Trump that could end up at the Supreme Court, not least of which coming out of the New York Southern District, for example, that they have as favorable a bench as possible to consider anything in the president's favor.
Thank you for that. Yes, it was the electoral impact that I was interested in there, in terms of the extent to which the Supreme Court had some power plays within that mix, and a nice little comparison with the Warren Commission there, in typical James Boyce fashion. Let's delve into the Trump and Corona situation, and I'd like to begin with this notion that he and members of his team were infected, and yet allegedly then, knowing that, moved around and engaged with rallies and press conferences and otherwise. Can you speak to the veracity or lack thereof of these stories, please?
So at the height of the Watergate hearings, the expression which came to define those events was this: what did the president know and when did he know it? Clearly, the great question at the moment is, when did the president know he was sick and what did he do about it? Right now, nobody seems to be able to answer those questions. The deputy White House press secretary that was put forward to answer questions last night on the media because everybody else was sick, quite frankly, was asked categorically, do you know when the president last tested negative for this, even if you won't tell us? Realizing, I think, that there was a concerted effort by the White House not to reveal when that was, just asking if you actually did know when that was. And even that question got a fudged answer. So the great debate, of course, is not just did Donald Trump travel to rallies last week and possibly infect people in places like, I think it was New Jersey he went to. Is it possible that Donald Trump had this going into the debate last Tuesday and knew about it? Is that possibly why he gave such a rambling, incoherent, and odd performance in the debate, for example? Now, Joe Biden has been tested for coronavirus subsequently and has come up negative. But what is telling is that pretty much everybody who was involved with the president's debate preparation, including people like Chris Christie and all his press entourage, have pretty much come down with this, from the president on downwards, Hope Hicks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It would be remarkable, I think, if it were to emerge that the president didn't have this on last Tuesday going into the debate. Right. Can't prove that, and I doubt at this point whether the White House is going to release any medical files to that effect, because very clearly, if you watch the news over the weekend, the way that the president's medical condition has been addressed, spoken to by a phalanx of White House physicians in their ominous white coats outside the Walter Reed Medical Center, this has more of a sort of a North Korean appearance to it than something that you'd usually see here in what's meant to be the heart of democracy. So the extent to which Donald Trump had this last week, knew about it and traveled anyway, is clearly going to be something which I imagine questions will continue to be asked about in the days and weeks that follows. But very clearly Donald Trump has tried to downplay this, downplay the severity of it. But more and more people are being affected by it. I said the people who were with him on the debate prep have clearly come down with the same virus. People who were at the press conference to unveil President Trump's appointee to the Supreme Court have come down with this. Whilst he was at Walter Reed Medical Center over the weekend, he thought it appropriate to get dressed, get into the presidential limousine, and ride out to the gate to sort of say hello effectively to those admirers who would gather to offer their support. And of course, in the process, almost certainly exposed his Secret Service agents to the coronavirus. Then he flew back to the White House on Marine One. There were pilots on that aircraft who could almost certainly have been exposed when he landed at the White House. He was trailed by the official White House photographer, who many people noticed was in the back of the live feed of Donald Trump as he ran up the steps into the White House and spoke and appeared on the balcony. He took his mask off in her presence. He has become the epicenter, if you will, of the coronavirus in the White House itself. So this is a remarkable development. You would have thought that the experience would have sort of taught Donald Trump a lesson in humility, but it would appear to be a lesson too far for this president.
Political leaders with pointed fascinations for their own balconies don't tend to end well career-wise. You touched upon his return to the White House there, which for many seems a little too soon in terms of medical professionals across the Twitter sphere and otherwise. You and I have known each other long enough to know that we don't tend to go in for conspiracy theories and otherwise. But to what extent, in your opinion, would any sort of conspiracy regarding faking having the coronavirus or otherwise work in the president's favor in this situation?
So there is no doubt about it. I think that there are people who have raised the question as to whether this was a staged event. Did Donald Trump really ever have this? Was this just an attempt to play the virus for political gain? I'm going to dismiss that simply because I don't believe that Donald Trump would have wanted for 1 minute to show that he was ailing in any way, that he could have got this. I think far better if he, more likely in terms of a conspiracy would be that if he had contracted this, for it to have been totally denied and not referred to. I don't think he would have faked having it to show some sort of dramatic recovery. I think that when you consider the amount of people who have been seen to have come down with this in his entourage, the idea that this could be faked would be remarkable, and let's not raise the moon landing, but the idea that so many
no
people
intention of doing so.
Have gotten this, quite frankly, I don't think they would have all faked this, quite frankly. What is notable, I thought, and few people have mentioned this, so let me see if I can raise this, is that when Donald Trump returned to the White House in that dramatic fashion, quite frankly, on Marine One and walked up the steps, and then addressed the nation, there was no mention of the First Lady at all. Melania Trump is the First Lady of the United States. She apparently has this. She didn't attend Walter Reed Medical Hospital with the president, so far as anybody can tell. Nobody's seen sight or sound of her since the diagnosis. One presumes she's at the White House, but if she is, how is she? One hopes she's well. How is this affecting their child, Barron? Where is he in all this? Again, there are questions which aren't being asked, and in that void, people are making up their own facts. Now, of course, this is an administration which likes its own facts when it suits. But where is the president? So since he's returned to Washington on Monday night at about 5:30, no one's seen him. There are various competing accounts of where he is, what he's doing. Some people suggested that, he's at the Oval Office. Then that was retracted. Then it was not. Then it was. He's meant to be in the residence in seclusion. But quite frankly, if he is not well enough to work in the Oval Office as president full time, what does that tell you? Many people who looked at the video of him standing on the balcony at the White House on Monday night observed that he seemed to be having trouble breathing on one or two occasions. Now, if you've just been diagnosed with COVID 2 or 3 days beforehand, that's not surprising. But what is surprising is why on earth aren't you in hospital still? When you consider the apparent trajectory of this disease, by which it seems that it's possible that you get it, you're diagnosed with it, you don't immediately demonstrate symptoms, and then it can get a lot worse very quickly. One might imagine that with this being the president, they would want to keep him under the closest possible medical scrutiny. Now, whether that's happening behind closed doors in the residency at the White House is anybody's guess. No one's seen the president. No one's heard from the president. He is tweeting like crazy, of course. And the tone of his tweets are even more, how can one put this, angry perhaps than ever, quite frankly. A lot of caps. It appears that he's found the cap lock button on his iPhone, if that's what he uses. I imagine, I can't imagine he's on BlackBerry these days, and he's tweeting furiously. He has ensured that the Republicans have walked away from a deal with the Democrats that would have introduced a package deal to try to aid Americans suffering from COVID. But this is all going on behind closed doors. So where is he? What's he up to? How is he? How are the people around him? One wishes him well. One hopes that he is in good spirits. But quite frankly, when you consider the trajectory of this disease and how it has had a terrible impact on other people, one has to wonder why on earth he isn't being taken care of as closely as possible at Walter Reed, which was clearly the best place possibly for him to be from a health point of view, if not necessarily from a political point of view.
I admire you as ever for managing to separate the office from the man in this regard. I'd like to pick up on one little element there that you both elements that you covered, but in order. The one is this standing in the way of the COVID relief bill as perceived in this hour of history, and the other finally would be the tapes that were released of Melania around the children being separated from their parents, and otherwise that was released by a former aide to Melania. I just wanted your thoughts on those 2 points, and this sense that perhaps we're as usual we're being drawn to look at the what Trump would like us to look at rather than where we should be looking in terms of the roving searchlight.
Yeah, so one of the great gifts that Donald Trump has, which you have to acknowledge, I think, whatever you feel about his politics, is he has a remarkable and innate capacity to drive the narrative. He is, of course, the president of the United States. He does possess what Theodore Roosevelt called the bully pulpit, and he is using it tremendously. Again, whether you approve of his politics or not is almost irrelevant. He has long had this ability to drive a narrative. He did so before he was president. He, of course, had that ability when Barack Obama was president, and he, of course, was driving the birther narrative at one point. And ever since he descended that gold escalator in the Trump Tower back in 2015, I guess, he's been driving the narrative, and he continues to do so today. So much so that news events and stories which were detrimental to the president, not least of which, of course, was the New York Times reporting about the amount of federal income tax he paid, stories about Melania Trump and what she has apparently said on tape, which also includes attacking the president's former alleged mistresses, suddenly seems like old news almost immediately. We are, of course, focusing here in the United States upon the president's health, how that will bear out in the election, the growing importance thereof of the vice presidential nominees, Kamala Harris for the Democrats and Mike Pence for the Republicans, because one of the great challenges is and the great questions is: has there ever been an American presidential election in which the health of the vice presidents is more important? Because of almost an unspoken concern that they themselves could easily become president in the coming 4 years because of the age and health of the presidents that they would be serving in the election to take place in November. And this is clearly a matter of not just domestic politics, but of national security because of the health of the president, the health of the nominees, and how it is that health issues will play into an ability to perform the duties of the presidency come January 20th, 2021.
That's it for this week's American Chronicle, a chronicle that looked back upon a week, the plot of which, had it been pitched by a scriptwriter for a Hollywood TV series, would have been resolutely rejected and seen said writer fired immediately on the spot. This has been a 12th Peer Production 2020 with music by Chris Warner. Until next Thursday then, good luck. Now more than ever, and ever onward to you all.